Facebook group. Tonight, I think, is a pretty special conversation that we're going to have. We are going to focus tonight on the subject of finding fortitude and resilience kind of in the midst of the crazy coronavirus crisis that we're all living through and the shutdown of our business. And we are joined by a group of people tonight that I'm really excited to kind of have this conversation with and be able to share the resources that they're going to bring to us tonight. So I'm going to kind of just let the panel introduce themselves. To kind of have this conversation with. And start with Taryn if you'd like. You're right. Share the resources that they're going to bring to us tonight. So I'm going to kind of just let the panel introduce themselves.
I am a somatic trauma therapist.
Start with Taryn if you'd like. You're share the resources that they're going to bring to us tonight. So I'm going to kind of just let the panel introduce themselves.
I am a somatic trauma therapist.
Start with Taryn if you'd like. You're share the resources that they're going to bring to us tonight. So I'm going to kind of just let the panel introduce themselves.
I am a somatic trauma therapist.
Start with Taryn if you'd like.
Hi, I'm Shannon Cook. I'm the COO of Tortec and also an executive committee member of the coalition. And I'm excited to be with everyone tonight.
Thank you. Lori?
Hi, I'm Lori Rubenstein. I am the executive director of the Behind the Scenes Foundation, the Behind the Scenes charity that many of you know of. I spent 30 years as the executive director of the Entertainment Services and Technology Association, and before that was active as a lighting designer, stage manager, etc. in the industry.
Thank you. And Chance?
Hey, I'm Chance Stahlhut. I'm the senior vice president of PRG Audio. Joined VUR PRG in 2012 and was at Claire Global for 12 years before that. Hopped in a van in '98 doing some punk rock clubs and sleeping on couches, and have been touring or putting people on tour ever since.
Misty, you want to go next?
I'm Misty Roberts, and I'm a tour manager, and I'm the girl version of Chance. About 20 years ago, I hopped in a van and trailer with some friends of mine and never came out.
That's awesome. Thank you for being here tonight. And I'm going to just kind of direct traffic a little bit, but really let everybody else do the talking tonight. But my name is Eileen Valois. I'm the Senior Vice President of Sports and Fan Entertainment for PRG and one of the Executive Committee for the Live Events Coalition. So our town hall last week, we were kind of taking a look at what's been going on behind the Live Events Coalition so that you could sort of see what we've been doing over the last 5 weeks, from the time it started to the time that we now have 96 chapters and counting, and 18,000 members in the national group. And it's been a roller coaster. So we took you through a little bit about what was going on last week behind the scenes, but really now this is what it's really about for us, is figuring out a way to really connect our community with the resources and the support we need. So kind of to kick us off, Chance, where you have had, personal experience, both being on the road yourself, as you just talked about, and also, leading tour audio for PRG now, and having, team members that are doing the very same thing now and being so connected to that. Can you take us a little bit through your own experience, just, riding that roller coaster?
Yeah, no, I mean, and it's, I think all of us that have been in this world know it's definitely a roller coaster. When I got started, you start out and you're a younger person, and there's various ways in the industry, and it's you start touring, and it's a very interesting schedule. On your show days, you don't have to think a lot. It's very laid out for you as you get into the larger professional tours. This is when you're going to eat. This is the schedule. You quickly fall into this routine. So if you're somebody that likes routine, it very much feeds into that. If you're somebody that doesn't, it kind of does all the thinking for you. And then it's really weird. You go from that and you swing 180 degrees and you hit a day off, and you've got a day off in a city with no plans, for a lot of the people, I exclude your tour managers, your production managers, a lot of the guys on the road, that day off is truly a day off. And so you kind of go through these peaks and valleys. And then obviously, usually about 2 weeks into a tour, I was immediately starting to look for my next tour. If I had a 3 or 4 month thing, I was constantly looking at my schedule of how to fill the holes. I'm going through this, so I'm trying to budget and save and manage that, and manage relationships at home. sometimes successfully, to sometimes not, and you kind of build up this, you want to build up your cushion and try to hope that you can get through, November, December with work. And then you kind of coast through the winter months and you're, trying to find that next thing that comes out. And so for me, I did that. And, when I was a younger kid, I'm still young, but when I was, when I was a kid, I really struggled with depression. It's something I still struggle with my whole life. So for touring, for me, I found a lot of, real joy in it because of the fact that it was, sometimes, it was the immediate families. You're forced into compression with people. So you're forced to adapt and you're forced to be around people. And, if you're an introvert, you learn how to fake being an extrovert. And if you're an extrovert, obviously the whole, the whole thing works out well for you. But in 2012, I came off the road, and for me, I was faced with having to shift into learning routines at home. I had never been home for more than 2 weeks at a time since I was, 19 years old. So I was really, it took me probably 2 years to learn how to, get into a routine, like stop, it was easily 6-8 months before I kept thinking that the gig was going to drop out and I needed to go find my next gig. Like I was interviewing 4 gigs while having a full-time position because I just didn't know how to stop interviewing. And so, as I've done that, I've learned, and I made that transition, and it had, negative impacts on my life that I had to go back and fix, relationship impacts that I had to, it caused me to almost lose my marriage just because of that transition of trying to get off the road and, learning who I was and all this, because my whole life had stopped. I was having to relearn who I was and relearn everything about me, and then I've had guys on the road, and as you see younger people, you try to coach them, and from everything from being financially smarter than we were, physically taking better care of yourself, not doing some of the stupid things on days off we did. And so right now, that's a lot of the conversations I feel like I'm having in the last 6-8 weeks with people is, this is this is like getting off the road. And the problem, the exception is we've always, as an industry, we've always been able to figure it out. You could get off, there was always something else. The first time I sat down with a financial guy, he asked me what my college planning for my kids was. I was like, well, we've always figured it out. Like, I'm not worried about it, So for me, that's a big struggle. And that's what a lot of conversations I'm having right now remind me of. It was me in 2013, right after I got off the road, like people just frozen, not knowing what to do, and really struggling with the fact that they're into routines that they just had never been in.
Right. And I think about your story, and I think about the fact that it was just sort of in the course of your normal, daily life, and not in the middle of this economic crisis that we're in. And so it just is, you think about that, and then you think about it, it just, it magnified, because of what we're going through right now, and the fact that, we're ready and want to work, but can't because our industry is shut down, and all that goes along with that. Shannon, you have a story as well, and you're kind of living through it every day. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're going through in terms of your business at TourTech?
Sure. My husband is the CEO, so it was really scary when we lost such a huge amount of revenue, and then it all went away. We had to make some immediate cuts and let go half of our employees, which was excruciating. We were able, thankfully, to get a grant program to bring them all back last week. So now we've put a lot of pressure on ourselves and our employees to really rally together and develop and do research. And, we've got this 8-week challenge because that's as long as the money is going to last. So, as business leaders, we're trying to be really positive and push innovation and inspire people. But inside, sometimes we're feeling the exact opposite. We're scared, we're petrified, we're panicking. We've got people's livelihoods in our hands. And as a couple, that's another layer dynamic. Both of our incomes are tied to this. So that's having a personal impact on us as well. So it's, I think of the commercials you see when the person who's depressed and they've got the the sign, a placard in front of their face with a smile on it. And, I see us going through that periodically, feeling like we can't express or share what we're feeling or what we're going through. And that's a lot of pressure.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you've been working with me through this whole journey of creating live events over the last 6 weeks. And, it's been a lot. I mean, we've had a lot of our challenges, but yet you have been so supportive for the group and so optimistic and so, trying to maintain that level of sort of that positive outlook that you've had and knowing that you're going through that at the same time. It's a lot for you to sort of have on your plate.
Well, and I have to, it's funny you bring that up because that's also been almost a reaction. I've helped to be self-aware of how much energy I threw into the coalition because I felt so powerless. I've got to do something. I've got to make something happen. And I was splitting myself in too many directions and not giving my kids enough time, not being there for my husband. So, I think that's also a symptom, a side effect of feeling powerless.
Yeah. So, I'd love to go, Misty, I'd love to kind of talk to you next. Obviously this is a life that you live as well for your profession, but you've also been spending a lot of time talking about it through Showmaker Symposium. And I'm with the crew and the conversations that you've been having there. Can you talk to us a little bit about, I guess just your thoughts on what our community is going through. And then, would love to kind of dive into some of the things that you've been talking about, in terms of support and finding ways to support this community.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, when I introduced myself, I've been out on the road for a little over 20 years now. And mental health has not always been something that's been easy for me to talk about. And I really hit a wall with things probably about 3 or 4 years ago and had some pretty tough times and some pretty dark thoughts and decided it was time to really finally deal with it. And in dealing with it, I think that I kind of found my voice about how to talk about this in our industry, because we work in a very unique industry. We work in an industry that you're able to hop into a bus and run away from what you really think or what you really feel. And, we're in a different place every day. So it literally is, it's the perfect setup to not ever have to deal with how you really feel until you do hit that wall. And I found that the more vocal I got about it, the more people on tours I would have that would come up to me and say, thank you for talking about it, because there's so many of us that feel that way. And, it's always been looked down at because, you talk about how you're not feeling great mentally, you're weak. We work in this industry where you're supposed to, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and run in and get the job done at whatever cost that comes with. And I think I kind of got to a point that I got tired of doing that at the cost of how I felt every day. So one of the things that at the beginning of this year I started working with Jim Digby on was the Showmaker Symposium, which our concept of it was a yearly convention that had like certifiable, quantifiable classes and teaching opportunities that you could walk away from this convention with things that if you put them on your resume, they would give you a leg up on someone else. And then COVID-19 hit. So basically our planning, we would be on these phone calls and he and I would, be having these pretty deep conversations about, well, there's no way we could start pushing this out to people and be like, pre-register for next year, and as it started to really, reveal what this is really going to look like, he and I both just went, what, we have to pivot. Like, this isn't a time for, selling things to people or, how do we do this and continue that spirit of teaching? And, it's something Jim and I have talked about a lot, obviously, because of Jim's relationship with the Lincoln Park camp and Chester Bennington and, just my own mental health. And we just decided instantly that putting together some kind of a webinar on mental health to really let people know they had somewhere to go right now. I think out of all of the things that everyone is faced with right now, that, just instantly that first week, those feelings of isolation and loneliness, they're all the same things that we go through when we get home from a tour already. I've always called it the I'm off tour blues. You have that 3 or 4 days afterwards, you sleep the first couple days and then you wake up and you go, what do I do? Where's catering? Why don't I have a day sheet to tell me where I'm going to go today? Why didn't my bus drop me off at the front door of my work? We have all these things, as roadies that I kind of feel like sometimes we take advantage of the fact that, all these things are planned out for us. We don't have to think about them, where we have this very regimented schedule, like Chance said, that, this is what you're doing today. And you get home and you're like, do I make myself a schedule? How does this work? So I think that those are some of the main things that a lot of people are dealing with right now, is just that, what do I do with myself? And what do I do with these feelings that I'm feeling? So we've had, we're going into week 6 now of our I'm with the Crew webinar. And we have Taryn, who is here with us too. She's one of our trusted therapists. And we have a guy named Dave Sherman, who's an addictions specialist. Because that also is a very big, heavy factor in what people have going on right now too. So every week we pick a topic and just run with it. And we have, we've had some other special guests on, other therapists, other people in the industry to talk about, things that they're doing to deal with it and get through it. It's just a resource for people to know that they're not going through this alone. We all are experiencing it.
It's, it's interesting that you say that, because, you and Chance and Shannon all sort of have the perspective of the tour industry, the music side of and the live entertainment side of our business. But there are so many people now that, maybe their background isn't tour and they don't live their life on the road. Maybe they travel quite a bit for their work, but there are so many people, from meeting planners to caterers to photographers to, sports events and just every type of event, that our business is shut down right now. And so these are things that, it sounds like, you have been struggling with for some time, as Chance talked about, but this is sort of this new reality for so many across our industry right now who are grappling with trying to figure out how to get through the day. And I think, on top of, I think the regimented piece, it's interesting, Chance, that's the exact word you used when we talked earlier, but that's a big factor here. But there's this fear that, when is our livelihood coming back? I mean, and this is what, if you're in the business of live events, we're passionate about what we do, right? It's long hours, it's tough work at times. And, and the reward is worth it when, the show goes live and it goes well and you get one shot to get it right. It's an incredible thing. But it's a lot, and but we do it because we love it. And so right now we can't do it, and we have the financial impact as well. So there's so many people across this community of the coalition that are being impacted and experiencing some of this, and going through it and trying to figure out how to get through the day. And I think, Taryn and Lori, I feel like, Taryn as a therapist, and I know you've been working with Showmaker Symposium as well, as Misty said, would love to sort of understand, your thoughts and your experience so far through the programs that you've participated in, and just kind of talk to us a little bit about that and how we can kind of, I think there's a couple of different things, right? How do we get through the day? How do we manage our stress levels? How do we manage our anxiety? And then, when we need more, how do we tap into that? And I think, Lori, you've got some things that we definitely want to hear about in that regard as well. But Taryn, do you want to kind of start with that?
Sure. Yeah. I have a lot of clients. Most of my clients are in industries like yours, either music, entertainment of some sort, or I have some people who have production and event companies that they own as well. And so I think that what Chance said about when he came off the road and he had to relearn who he was, and Misty saying, what do you do when you come off? So you make yourself a schedule. I think that anybody within industries like that, where you're doers and you're producers, like you're constantly producing something and you're constantly doing, and no matter if you're on the road or off the road, you have a specific thing that you need to make happen consistently. There is like the idle hands. What do you do when you don't have that? And, I think the hardest part of this situation is that there aren't any immediate answers in terms of when it's going to come back. What will it look like when it comes back? There is a lack of control that you're dealing with now. And so that relearning of who I am, and I would even say that a lot of people are just learning for the first time who they are, that's I want to say unfortunately, because I know it's not like it doesn't provide the answer that most people want, but that is what probably has to happen right now, is that you probably have to be talking about what it is you're feeling and talk about what your fears are. We are the most in danger of those feelings when we don't process them out, when they stay compartmentalized inside of us. So it's really important to verbalize it, either to a therapist or to friends. I encourage writing if people are able to sit and just dump their thoughts onto paper. But there's a lot that goes to this, like a lot of the questions you ask, like how do you manage anxiety, depression? I mean, these are huge topics in and of themselves. So with depression and anxiety, I will say that from a somatic perspective, meaning like your nervous system, anxiety and depression are almost like two sides of the same coin. It's basically when your body is thrown into overwhelm, life gives you too much to handle all at once. And so your body goes out of what we call a window of tolerance. And depression is a dissociative state. So it means it's kind of like when you like leave your body, there's like a lack of energy. It's a low state. Anxiety is a high activation state. So it's like your body becomes, it's like an energy of mobility. It means like you want to be doing something, you don't know what to do. So being able to kind of have a framework around that and understand that there's a physiological response that you're having in addition to an intellectual mental response, I often find going to the body first to be really, really helpful for that. So I can get more into it as we go along, of course, but that's kind of like my baseline. I don't know if I covered everything you asked, but
no, absolutely.
Those are big questions.
No, I know, very good questions, enough to be solved in an hour. Which actually, Lori, is a great segue to kind of some of the work that you're doing with, behind the scenes. And I think it's, some of the tools that I've seen, on the website. We would love to hear more about those. I know some of them have just launched. One of the things that I love is that this community is really coming together. I mean, I think Shannon, I think you and I have said it 100 times in the last couple of weeks, but I'm inspired every day by the fact that there's just kindness that's happening in the community is just coming together. And it doesn't really matter what segment of this industry that you're from, but we're coming together and we're kind of figuring out ways to support each other. And the ghost light, Lori, right? Like that just is what it's about. It's that light, and it's the symbol, right? That, you're never alone, that you're people in the theater, they have your back, right? So
right.
Can you talk to us a little bit about that and about what you're kind of doing at behind the scenes and the tools that you've launched,
Sure.
you've got going on?
I mean, this conversation about mental health has been going on for a long time now in the industry, because even back in normal times, it was becoming a bigger and bigger issue. We were seeing more and more people with real issues, fighting addiction, fighting depression, anxiety. And it sort of really came home to me last spring, a year ago. I was doing organizing a rigging conference, and we were lucky enough to have the executive director of the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline come and speak. And in our preparation calls with him, he asked us what were some of the industry resources for mental health. And we said, well, there really aren't any. And that started the conversation. And so late last summer, we gathered a group of organizations and individuals with a lot of expertise and passion about this. And we began with a survey of the industry, which we had a tremendous response to. And that has really guided all of our actions and what we've undertaken. So one of the things that we've launched today, in fact, is something called Be Seen, Be Heard, which is a peer-to-peer chat app. It's a 24-hour, completely anonymous chat app. Because as several people have said, it can be very difficult sometimes to talk to family, close friends about what you're feeling, especially now because you know everyone's feeling it. It's difficult to burden them. So the idea is you can talk to other people who understand what you're going through. They're in the industry, they understand the culture, and you can talk to them about what's bothering you in an anonymous way. All you need is an email address to sign up, but the email address doesn't have to identify you. And right now we've created one sort of general room for conversation to happen, but you can form subgroups off of that. You can form subgroups for any type of group you might want to have people, one for touring people or one for riggers or electricians or caterers, whatever it might be. And you can also have individual conversations. As we see the need arise, we'll create more rooms. So perhaps a room for those who are coping with sobriety, or people who are particularly dealing with depression, or women in the industry, or those who are dealing with harassment and bullying. But the idea is it's available to you whenever you need it, wherever you are, for whatever's on your mind. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you wake up at 2 a.m. and you can't go back to sleep because you're just too worried about everything. What do? There's, you know, you don't want to call your therapist at 2 a.m. You can get on and start talking to people. And the idea is that there will be people on there who understand what you're going through and probably have gone through it themselves. And you can find some comfort in that, and people will naturally sort of become mentors to people and help them through difficult times. So we've just launched it. It's just started to have some people join, but obviously the more people that can join, the better, because then no matter when you get on, it will be available. It is, by the way, instantly translatable into 54 languages. So no matter what your language is. So that was one of the key things that came out. Another thing that we learned from the survey was how difficult it was for people to find a therapist who understood what they do for a living. So many people were frustrated by therapists who just didn't get it, mm-hmm. and made recommendations that were completely unrealistic, or who had 9 to 5 office hours and, you know, couldn't see people early or late or on weekends, that kind of thing. So we have partnered with an organization called Help Pro, which has run an online therapist finder for about 25 years, to create an entertainment industry therapist finder. And the criteria is that any therapist either has to have personal professional experience in the industry themselves, and many people have moved from careers in our industry into careers as therapists, or they have to have previously had clients in the industry or professionals in the industry. So they've already been educated by those clients. They already have an understanding of what the pressures are and what the issues are. And so we are adding new therapists every day to the finder. So if you don't find someone, always check back to see. I would remind people that particularly now, when most therapy is happening as teletherapy, that you can see anyone as long as they hold a license in the state that you're in. So it doesn't have to be someone within a 25-mile radius or a 50-mile radius. And also to ask if we've put out a call to the industry to say, if you have a therapist to recommend, someone you've seen that you thought was helpful and understood, please send their information to us. We'll contact them and tell them about the finder. So that was just launched last week, and we've had a lot of interest from therapists, a lot of people doing searches for therapy.
That's
a couple of other things very quickly. We also launched an online behavioral health screening program. These are essentially online self-assessments. They're completely anonymous and private, easily accessible. They're very quick to complete, but you can go on, and if you're unsure of what you're feeling is really a problem and you want to learn a little bit more about it, you can take, there are 9 different assessments you can take. There's a general one, and then there are ones that focus on depression or anxiety or sobriety, alcohol misuse, drug misuse, etc. And you answer a series of simple questions, and at the end, it will let you know if it thinks you're potentially at risk for these or suffering from this, and then it leads you to resources. And there are a large number of resources. It'll give you some general information about the condition and explain that you're not alone, that these are often very common, and here's some resources. And that leads me into my final thing is we quickly realized on our committee as we were trying to develop these resources that anyone who's really struggling, if you get on the internet and you start doing a search, you go through down rabbit hole after rabbit hole. It's just overwhelming. So we have compiled what we hope is a very simple, straightforward set of resources on our website that are segregated. We have the hotlines, the crisis hotlines. We have resources for suicide prevention, eating disorders, etc., anxiety, depression, and the resources are just brief descriptions, how you get in touch with them. There are icons which indicate if they offer good resources in terms of educational information, or if they offer some skills building tools, and those are available now. And we're in the process of creating a set of resources for our Canadian friends, and those will be up hopefully early next week.
Okay, that's amazing. And I we've looked at some of those today, and Shannon, you and I have talked about some of those, and we have them compiled into a resource guide along with quite a few of the other resources that we found or that have been submitted to us. And we're going to put that out to our Facebook community following this, and share that resource guide with everyone. So that we can
I'll just say that if I'll give them one URL to go to. If you go to btshelp.org/mental health, you can then access all of those resources.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that's fantastic. And Taryn, I don't know if you've had an opportunity to look at that yet or not, and see what's kind of been going on over there, but your thoughts on just, I guess, an easy way, or whether it's easy or not, but a way that we can share with family or friends or colleagues that are going through this. How do we support them and put them in the right direction from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, Lori, what you're doing is amazing. And I think that if anything, that like what Lori is doing and what we're doing with the Showmaker Symposium, like the core of that is, to me at least, is that there's a real deep validation for the mental health struggles that people are going through. The nature of any of this existing really speaks to that this is something that people are going through, and it's okay that you're going through that. And so to me, the core of reaching out is to know that it's okay that I'm struggling, and that struggling and asking for help does not mean that I'm weak. It means actually that I'm accessing strength within myself. It's a lot more difficult actually to admit that you're going through a hard time, because all of our self-defenses are in business to keep us from feeling all of that pain, to keep us from feeling, how hard it actually is. So it actually takes deep strength to say, you know what, I need some support right now, and you can even replace help, because there is this weird connotation to it that it's like maybe like it's something that's difficult for people to wrap their head around, but like support. I need some support right now, because we are not meant to go through all of these trials of life on our own anyway. Like as a therapist, I have a therapist, and like I have people that I reach out to all the time when I need support, and there isn't any shame in that. It's the shame that we already hold in our bodies that tends to like get in the way of that. But I hope that the existence of these programs, it's like, if you think about Lori's idea, I mean, Lori, that's like, there's this validation that is so in play in that, to be able to go on and chat with somebody, what they're getting right away from that mentorship that you're saying is validation that, yeah, it's hard. I've been there too, and you're going to get through it. It's so simple in a way, but that is got the most leverage than anything else sometimes. It's just that validation.
Mm-hmm. Taryn. Sorry. When you talked about anxiety and it being kind of this elevated moment, something clicked for me because I can't sleep. I have a really long, tiring day. I'm tired, but I can't stop my day yet. And I feel like I have to turn on the TV and watch something. Or what are the things can I do to kind of control that or regain control over those feelings?
That's such a good question. Yeah, when you have a lot of anxiety, it's what we call a dysregulated system. So a nervous system at like regulation would be like a neutral nervous system, right? So regulated, calm, present. We call it a relaxed state of readiness. Basically, it's like where you're present but you're here. Your survival mechanisms are not on. When you have a lot of anxiety, your system is dysregulated. So one way to help the evening is to work on how you feel throughout the day. So we call it tracking in somatics, which just means to track the sensations in your body. It's sort of like developing a new layer of awareness. We're very into, as a society, like the mental part of things and less about the physical felt experience of things. But if you start to develop slowly an awareness of what is happening in your body, and we just call it sensations, meaning like we take the narrative out of it, take the story out of it, and just look at what your body is feeling, you can start to learn how to self-regulate. And that will, over time, shift your nervous system and help you in the evenings to settle more. So ways to do that are just to notice, if you notice you have that activation in your body, it's kind of that like vibrating kind of like feeling, where it's like kind of pulsing, if you start to feel that, or you notice you're shaking, or you notice you need to like move a lot and you can't sit still, that kind of a thing, or you're noticing the feelings of anxiety or panic arising, try to take a step back and ground yourself. Use deep breaths. The deep breaths will help actually regulate your system. Step outside if you can, put your feet into the earth, slow down a little bit, look all around the room, and kind of like bring your awareness back into the present moment if you can. Even if it doesn't work completely, which I would never have an expectation that you can go and just shift your nervous system perfectly. Like I study this and work with that on a daily basis. And even I can't do that sometimes, but like if you work on it throughout the day, you're going to little by little, it has this compound effect. You're going to little by little have more control over it in the evenings, and you'll have a less active nervous system by the time the evening comes. Also, simple things that are really like, we probably hear them a lot, but from a physiological perspective, it's really important to understand the news, our screens, our phones, all of these things, they really don't help. Like we do need time to step away, to just be turned off from the outside world a little bit, have some time to go inward. You can sit and just do a body scan meditation. It doesn't have to be a serious spiritual meditation thing, but just like sit, close your eyes, notice what you're feeling in your head, notice what you're feeling in your jaw and your throat, notice what you're feeling in your chest, notice what you're feeling in your belly, and just kind of go down into your feet, just checking in with your body that way. That will kind of chill you out a little bit. These are really small, basic things, but they will, especially over time, they will help you a lot, a real lot. And trying to have some type of patience with yourself too. Like I think that there's this anxiety that can happen from having anxiety. Do you know what I mean? Like you're like lying in bed and you feel anxiety and your body can't relax, and then you get even more anxiety because you really need to sleep because you have all this stuff to do tomorrow, and it's like, it just kind of like compounds in the wrong direction. So if you can like try to like, yeah.
Just described my last week entirely. My last 5 weeks. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, because the thing is that activation, and I try to replace anxiety with activation, because then it kind of takes some of the like story out of it a little bit. It gives us more control, but that activation, one of the things that it manifests is rumination. So when we're ruminating and our minds are going and going, that's a product of our anxiety, so if we can kind of get underneath it a little bit and just have patience with ourselves and just like sometimes like there's certain things we can tell ourselves, like, you know, I can't come up with one on a whim right now because I usually do it specifically for people, but like, you know, like even if you say like, I'm okay, everything is going to be okay, you know, something like that, that you need to hear. And just sort of slowly like try to let your body sink into the bed. No pressure. If you fall asleep, you great. If you don't, that's okay too. I'll rest tomorrow if I need to. I'll take a break tomorrow. Like any bit of that little pressure that you can take off will take away some of that extra activation on top of it. And again, there's this effect over time that changes our nervous system and slowly puts us into a space of control over it rather than our nervous system controlling us, if that makes sense.
A lot of sense. That's really valuable. Thank you.
It
Yeah,
is.
for
I feel super lucky because Taryn taught me these things a couple of years ago when I started seeing her. And it was literally one of our first therapy sessions is me standing in a parking lot in Mexico City at Foro del Sol on Skype, trying to have a therapy session while my band was sound checking behind me and having those high moments of activation and her talking me through the process of, you know, grounding yourself and just taking a step back and actually feeling what you feel in your body instead of what you feel in your brain. And for 3 years since then, I have practiced that every single night when I lay down to go to sleep. And at first it's hard. And at first I was like, wait, this is kind of hokey. Like, how do I feel in my body? Those things are actually real. They're real, believe it or not.
No, absolutely.
Like,
I believe it. I believe
you know,
it.
that what Taryn described as like, you know, that highly activated, I call it my internal buzz. It's just that like you feel like your skin's vibrating. And you know, that's how I always explained my anxiety to everyone is I'm on fire. Like my skin is on fire. I feel that high activation of just not ever feeling calm. And those things that she just went through are daily practices for me now. I also have found since this has hit, there are a million apps on your phone that, you know, previously had been, you know, pay apps like Calm. I actually sent Taryn one the other day that I've started using called Relax Melodies. And, you know, I don't know how familiar you guys are with ASMR noises and things like that, but it has an entire, you can program your own noises. You can pick which noises go into mixes. They're I'm going to say this and you're all going to laugh at me, but they're bedtime stories. And I've been listening to bedtime stories.
I've done it too. Totally.
There are like
I've done it.
adults, you know, they're not like, oh, the princess ran
Yeah.
into a big bad wolf. But I
Yeah.
mean, they're takes on that for adults. And they're just very, very calming because it takes you to that place when you were little and you remember your parents, you know, your mom sitting there reading you a bedtime story.
Yep.
And there's not a single one that I have finished yet because I fall asleep about halfway through it because it's incredibly calming to me.
I mean, sometimes you just have to take yourself out of your daily, you know, there's so much that we're dealing with right now and running in so many different directions, and you have to take yourself out.
And there's a lot to be said for that whole turning your devices off an hour before you know,
it's my biggest issue. Yeah, absolutely. I'm just around the clock right now. And I feel like I can't justify putting it down because we're in crisis mode. And if for some reason somebody needs something, and that's what I tell myself, but I know it's extremely important.
I mean, what Taryn taught me once is that you can't be of service to somebody else if you're not okay yourself.
You're absolutely right. There's a saying about pouring from an empty kettle. I'm Irish, and my grandfather used to say you can't pour a pint from an empty keg. We talk about it in beer terms in my family, but no, it's exactly true. Chance, you had a question. Can you want to jump in?
Well, let me ask this because I did, and this kind of it goes into that. So I'm like that. I'll be honest. As a well-practiced introvert, when I have conversations with people, I'm smart enough to fake it to get them to, you know, talk about themselves and go that. But as I look on Facebook, you know, the tone, and Eileen and I talked about this about 2 weeks ago as we saw the touring community kind of realize what the summer was going to stack up to be. We've seen the tone shift in social media. We've seen the tone shift in conversations. How do you guys recommend maybe having, I find it's very easy for me to sit there and go, look, I need help, mental health. I talk to people, I really appreciated Lori's comment earlier. It took me a long time to find a therapist. I would do the initial call with them, the screening call, probably a dozen before I even was willing to actually like go down that road, because just nobody got it. But how do I shift from that idea of I'm talking to somebody and this is not just, hey, I'm letting you pour out, to like, hey, you really need to start having a conversation? Because that's where I think Eileen and I got on the same page a couple weeks ago, is we were seeing just people's attitudes really starting to shift during this time from, hey, this is temporary, to, oh, wow, like there's something long lasting here. How do you broach that conversation to somebody and say, hey, you probably need to talk to somebody?
I've done it exactly like what you just said. I mean, I probably have an easier time being a little bit more bluntly honest with people than a lot of people do, but I've had 3 different situations now that I've said exactly what you just said. Hey, I can sit here and we can do this and I can listen to you, but I don't feel like I'm able to help you with what you need right now. And I think you need to talk to somebody.
Yeah. And you can just say, I have somebody that might be able to support you, and send them to Lori's thing, or send them to the webinar, or send them to something when you have like a resource that you can actually send somebody to, like, hey, this might help you, I'm here for you, but I know this is a little outside of my scope, but that these resources might help you too. And I know I'm using them myself. It's always, even if you're not, it's kind of helpful to just like kind of personalize it to yourself too, and just say like, I know I need to reach out for help. You know what I mean? It's like, it helps people. The other thing I want to say to what Misty was saying before, if it's okay, is that, Misty now has been doing this work for a while, and there are some people right now who this is the first kind of brush up with trauma, with an awareness of trauma. They probably have had trauma in their lives before, but this is a very traumatic event for people, meaning like the rug is getting pulled out from underneath, right? Like the rug that they found their footing on. And so this sometimes, and very often actually, there's like people become immobilized. And so you'll see these like a lot of resources available, and you'll see like a lot of these different suggestions and apps and all of these things. But at a certain stage, like, I don't know, Misty, maybe you can speak to it, but I don't know if 2 years ago when you were on the walkie-talkie and having that experience in therapy session on the walkie-talkie, by the way, if you would have wanted to go back and use an app. You know what I mean? Because it's one of those things that's like, sometimes it's harder than we think to turn our phones off and not read the news. It's harder than we think to use some of the resources, because the nature of the trauma we're going through is immobilizing us. So that's just something to speak to,
I think for me, I was at a really interesting point. I was at a point that I feel like I would have tried anything, because I was so frustrated and so hurt, and I didn't know where to go, but I knew that I wasn't done.
Yeah.
Like I knew that, I had suicidal thoughts. I did. But I knew that I wasn't going to follow through with it because I wasn't finished. I still had some sense inside of me of going, there's more left. There are more things for me in this world to do still. And I think that my desperation pointed me in a million different directions. I was a completely open like sponge to anything that anyone had wanted to advise me to do. And Taryn and I laugh about it because I followed her Instagram for 2 months, and I stalked her as a therapist to figure out if she was in alignment with what I wanted. And I know people don't really have that kind of time right now. I mean,
Don't
like,
am I on social media, by the way, anymore.
yeah, a friend had recommended her, and I was like, it was important enough to me that I found somebody that, I was in alignment with how that work was going to happen. And so I like Lori's, the Be Seen, Be Heard is to me incredible, because that is something that when I was, in the depths, I would have used that in a heartbeat, because I would have picked it up in Mexico City in the middle of the night when I couldn't sleep, because I had those exact problems, Shannon. Like, insomnia was something that I would say I maybe functioned on 2 to 3 hours of sleep a night for 15 years. and that of course in itself takes a huge toll on you mentally and physically. But I can't tell you how many nights that I would have reached for that phone to go, I just need someone to hear me.
Right.
Like, that's all it was. I need to like verbal diarrhea it out of me somehow, and I need somebody to hear that, and
Right.
to at least just acknowledge that I have a feeling and they hear it.
Yeah.
So I myself probably wouldn't have done really well with the online assessments of things, because it's just not down my alley. But I think that there are a lot of people that it is incredibly, incredibly useful for. And 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I saw a therapist off and on for, I don't know, since probably the age of 17. I feel like if I would have had a tool like the Find a Therapist, it's almost like a matchmaker tool. There's something great about that.
Yeah.
I would have definitely used that, because like I said, my process for finding Taryn and starting to do this work was waiting to see if she would post an Instagram so I could read what she said to see if like that was in alignment with me. So I know I can't be the only one out there that really tried to figure out if their therapist was the right fit before starting to see them.
Misty, there is a webinar happening tomorrow.
Yeah.
Can you share with us the topic or some of the other topics that you've previously done that there are recordings available for?
Yeah, absolutely. The first week was the first week was the first week. We thought it might just be a one-time thing. And so it was just about mental resilience during the blackout. And we had Taryn and Dave on, just to talk about some easy, quick exercises of when you're finding yourselves in those moments of anxiety or depression. And they got pretty deep into some of those processes, which was awesome. And we realized the feedback we got afterwards, but also after we got off the call, that there's so much left to explore. So we asked Taryn and Dave to be our perma therapist on our panel. And the second episode, we had Tamsin Embleton from, I think it's called the MITC. It's a UK program, and she has been awarded, I guess, by Live Nation to write a mental health on the road book. She comes from a live events background. And so it's kind of a collaboration book with a whole lot of different, there's sex addiction therapists, there's, just a substance abuse therapist, and they each have different parts of that book. She put out like a 40-page, like a quick guide to self-isolation and what to do in these times with this. And it's incredibly, incredibly helpful. It's got breathing exercises. It's got, physical exercises. It even talks about, how to go grocery shopping properly and nourish your body the right way right now.
And I think we've got a link to that book in our resources, so we'll be able to share that with everyone. Eileen, do you have questions from the group?
There are just not so many questions, but more just some statements, and I'm just going to kind of share them. We have one that has sort of weighed in and said, we get addicted to the hustle that is production life. and the demands that it has of us. And there's a feeling of being almost stuck at an installation that just lost power, which I think is a really interesting way to look at that. And the fact that we're just all here still pushing in and building the stage and just waiting for the lights to come back on. Like that's this feeling. And I think that's a really apt way to put it. And it's similar to so many things I've heard over the last few weeks from people. I think that's interesting. We're all sitting here in limbo and just waiting for our business to come back on. And we're not quite sure when that's going to be. And
that would cause a lot of anxiety, by the way, because anxiety, like that high activation, is that energy of action of wanting mobility. So if you're feeling stuck, that's just another way. Like I just want to bring some attention into that, because your systems are all probably very wired for that doing. And so not only are you experiencing a system at threat now because you've had that rug pulled out from under you, but you're also dealing with a baseline that was already wired for doing. So you're almost having like this double whammy in a certain way. So being able to like understand that, sit with it, talk about it, and kind of like make your bodies active in some way will actually really help that.
Yeah. And I think that's so true of our community, right? We're just always, we're always pressing, like we're always going, and we're sitting here and wanting to work right now and can't. And that is just really difficult. Another comment that we have here is just that there's almost a feeling of, having just gotten out of prison, right? So we're just, and there's this sense of withdrawal, it's almost as though, we're institutionalized, and the feeling of withdrawal because we now have a much different way of life. And I think that's another feeling that I've heard a lot about, like we're going through these withdrawal symptoms and have no idea how to process them.
Grief. It's grief. Last week's episode on the webinar was on grief, and I do really recommend that people, if you're feeling that withdrawal, if you do check that out, because grief is a complicated experience, but definitely that's a huge thing that everyone is experiencing right now, and the heartbreak underneath some of that we're probably trying to avoid feeling. So that might be supportive to watch.
And sort of hand in hand with that, I think we're all kind of dealing with this one as well. It's a loss of identity. Like this industry, I think most of us that are in it have been in it for a very long time. I started in this industry when I was 18 years old, and I've been working, basically full time ever since, almost. And it's my identity entirely. And so what does happen if our events don't come back, in the next few months, and we start to have to look at what other options are out there. We have people that are accepting jobs in industries right now because they have to put food on the table or take care of themselves, but have completely lost what they identify with. And so I think that's another huge challenge for our community right now as well.
It's,
go ahead, Jim.
You said it earlier, and you said it earlier, the ghost light thing, there is that. And that's been a hard conversation to have with people is, look, to go to some of the freelance road guys and go, we're not going to have a gig anytime soon. You really do need to look at some of these other, options right now. The flip side of that being, look, we don't know when, but Hamilton is still loaded in right now.
Mm-hmm.
All the gear is sitting in the shops right now. All the venues are there, the sport, like it will come back at some point. That ghost light will go off. We'll open those shows again. We'll put them back on. The Jimmy Fallon show is still loaded into the studio, waiting to turn back on. So it's just that, I would say, is the thing I've struggled to, of like, how do I tell somebody? I've struggled to. You need to find something else, but this is still going to be here at some point for you.
Yeah. Like that, Chance, some of the stuff that you're saying, like you're saying you're struggling with how to say that to somebody, but the way that you're saying it is absolutely perfect. It's just that, and like you say it with an open heart and with that compassion, and that's all that you need. I think that we often want this, like, how can I really fix this for somebody? But really, like, the way that you're saying it is that's the truth. you're saying it in a really true way, and you're saying it not from a place of trying to bypass the reality, but not in a place where you're making it more catastrophic than it is. You're dealing with what is when you say it that way, and that's really all that you have to do. And you're an industry of people who fix things for people, and so that's just something to internally check in with too, is like, I won't have the magic thing to say, because there is no magic thing to say, but I can say that maybe it's time to go get some extra support. Maybe, it is, you do take another job, but it'll be back. Those are perfect. It's perfect,
Also, I
But
think
it's
as an individual, really important right now to it's a really good time to go, instead of Misty with, how about Misty is? I'm not Misty with such and such artist right now anymore. I'm not Misty with PRG or whatever. I'm Misty is what? I
Right.
am intelligent, I'm driven, I'm all these things. And it's really easy to, at that, when you put it in that perspective, what are you? It's really easy to see your ability to take your skills and use them in something else right now. Because you're right, Chance, that it is going to come back. It may not happen as quickly as somebody needs it to financially, and you may have to pivot. But how many times have some of us come home from a tour and then not had a tour for a while and had to think about that pivoting anyway already? This is very, very similar to that, coming home from a tour and not having the next one lined up. It's just, it really, there isn't a lot of difference, because you don't have control over that either. So it's okay to really just kind of think about, instead of who you're with and what it is that you think that you do, what are you? Because I've sat and I've thought about, okay, what am I? What am I good at? What are my actual translatable skills? And in that, all kinds of things pop up that I could do in the meantime. Once things do open up and it's not the live events industry, there's still other stuff out there. I know that that's not the answer that everybody wants to hear right now, but it's the reality of it.
It's true. It's true. Actually, there is another question, if you don't mind just hanging on for a few more minutes. We said an hour, we're just a little bit over that, but we talk about turning off our devices, which I think is, probably my biggest issue, personally. But there's this need to, there's a feeling that we have to stay connected to the network, because we have to figure out what's next, right? And so there's this battle almost with, and this is the question, how do you balance that? How do you balance, you're afraid to miss something, an opportunity might come across your network at all hours of the day and night, and so you don't want to turn off your devices, but this is the time when you need to be networking, but this is the time when you need a little peace and quiet in your brain as well. And so how do you find that balance?
Yeah, I mean, I would ask, like, is that true?
It's not.
Like,
I
is
sat
that,
on the other
yeah,
table, and
that's anxiety. That's the activation speaking. It's your nervous system at threat that's making you feel like, if I put this down right now, like, I'm going to lose everything, because it's grasping for a sense of control, just for a sense of control. And you're not going to get it from staying on your phones. What you do have to remember, though, is that when you do turn off your phone, it is not like this freeing thing where it's just like, oh, there you go, I'm going to go, we'll just go on my peaceful walk now and feel good, like, that would be awesome. But really, when you put it down, you're probably going to feel like shit, and you're probably going to be scared, and your nervous system is probably going to ignite even more. So if you can withstand that and just ground yourself, use your breath, use the orientation tools that we talk about in one of the webinars. I swear we talk about it in one of them, I think, right, Misty? Yeah, episode 1. If you use the tools, even if it doesn't work perfectly the first time, the more you do it, the more you're signaling to your nervous system that you are in control, and that actually we are not at threat right now. It's okay. You actually have to signal to your system that it is okay to put your phone down, and it doesn't happen right away. So just be prepared for that anxiety to keep coming, and work with it. And over time, it will dissipate. You'll be able to disconnect more safely.
And
Yeah.
Chance, you can probably speak to this too, but I'm pretty sure that most people, the first like week and a half of this, send out all those emails to all those people they haven't talked to in 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
And, hey, I'm available. Nothing is gonna happen profoundly in an hour that your phone is turned off in this industry that is gonna make you miss out on the next year of touring. Like,
No,
you've
no, it's
emails out, you've put it out to the people. Nothing, like, you will know when something happens. Until then, you don't need to be on it all like, that's just the reality of it. Sorry, guys.
At the very least, bookend your days. Like, give yourself an hour in the morning before you turn it on. Give yourself an hour at night. If that's too much, start with 10 minutes. Honestly, like, you can start small. You don't have to be like, this is not like baby steps really, really works best in these situations anyway. Just do a little bit. Just be like, I'm going to wait 10 minutes before I turn my phone on when you wake up, and just put your phone down 10 minutes before you go to bed, and then just slowly expand it if you need to. But the way you bookend your days will help your baseline of regulation.
Great tip. And I mean, and some of the breath work that you talked about, I mean, if you actually do start focusing on that, you start focusing on the devices a little less, right? I mean, I know my daughter has been going through some difficult times since last summer. She was just diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, and she's been really in tune with the breath work and really kind of what you were talking about earlier. And it's, I mean, her strength is amazing through it, but I think that she's actually kind of winning in that area, right? A little bit less dependency on technology and all of the different things that just keep us, wired and connected, and more focused on that, on self-care and really being in tune with what you're feeling and dealing with.
Yeah, if you could focus on regulation, which I know is like new terminology for most people, and so I don't mean to get too technical with it, but if you can start to use that terminology for yourself, I really do think it helps, because it does put you more in control. And the breath, the deep, like, those breaths work because it ignites your parasympathetic nervous system. And so it really is like the brakes to your nervous system. So if the anxiety is like the go, 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 right? Then those deep breaths help put the brakes on a little bit and help you get to that neutral more. So
that's awesome. Well, I think I'm so glad that you all joined us tonight. Chance, we're getting a lot of comments about your bravery, being among all of these strong women here. So I just wanted to let you know that.
My daughters texted me during this that they were watching from downstairs and really enjoyed the girl talk session that I was going through right now.
Well, you're welcome anytime.
I know. Totally appreciate you guys.
How many things though are like, there's one woman in a group of like all men?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's a nice little switch.
I know, that's
it
usually our
is.
life, right? Especially in this industry, that's usually our life. So yeah. But thank you, Chance, for joining us. And no, thanks to everybody. I mean, I think this was a really great discussion tonight, and I think the starting point for our community here. And I love that we talked about, just some things that we can be doing in our own life, just the breath work that we just talked about, and the things that we can be doing to try to, mitigate some of what we're going through. But then that we also talked about the access to resources, Lori, through all that you're offering, and the fact that we can kind of tap into those next level resources that we may need, or that, that friends or colleagues or family members may need, and that they're there and available for us. So
absolutely. These are new resources. So I just want to say, encourage people, because obviously the more that use them, the more beneficial it will be to everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And so all of this is going to be in that resource guide that we're going to put out to our community for sure, and share to whomever we can. And I would just ask everybody, we'll have it loaded into our Facebook group, either, I would say, by tomorrow morning. I'm going to turn my phone off tonight, actually, on my computer. But we'll have it up by tomorrow morning, and we'll share that across the community. And just thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. It's a great start to this dialogue for the Live Events Coalition community. So thank you.
Have a good one, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.